Migraine Headache and Awareness Month. So we have the topic on environmental issues to mitigate headaches, in particular migraine. This is the topic we have chosen. And the next item would be the welcoming the people officially. I like to call upon Professor Jay Srinivasan. I like to brief about him. He don't want those things, but I feel very proud to talk about him. He's a graduate of IIT Madras and he's a gold medalist. And he did his MS in State University in New York and a PhD in Stanford University. And the founder of this center, the VHS Center Climate Change. And he was the past chairman from 2009 to 2016. And emeritus distinguished professor of the VHS and Climate Change till date. In addition to that, he's the honorary professor of Center for Atmospheric and Oceanic Studies, Indian Institute of Science till date. He's the lead author of the second and fourth IPCC report, Climate Change, and a reviewer, editor on the third report. We have just received only the sixth report, IPCC report. And his major scientific contributions are in the area of monsoon models and climate change. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Ministry of Earth Sciences 2019. He's a man with values, as I know, disciplined, simplistic way of life, with helping hand, with academic zeal to propagate the knowledge. And he has published over 125 research papers on climate and thermal science. And he don't want to mention this one. He is the, I would say, Sir C.V. Raman was his uncle. So, and also, he's a true follower of the carbon footprint. And from Malleshwaram, he comes in a bus. And from Institute to here, 1.5 kilometers, he comes in a bicycle. The thorough vegetarian totally. So this is 2 tons of carbon dioxide footprint he saves every day. He's a man to be emulated. So we call him the carbon footprint regulator of the center. We can nickname him today itself for you. So I have a great pleasure welcoming him so that he can give the welcome address to the audience and the people who are there in the website.
Thank you, Dr. Paramesh. On behalf of S.C. Satish, Chairman, Debate on Climate Change, I invite all of you for this monthly seminar organized every last Thursday of the month on issues related to environment and health. And we have had many eminent speakers talk on a variety of issues, and we have learned a lot from all of them. And today's talk is on headache. I'm sure all of you have real and imaginary headaches which you have dealt with. And we all know headache is not an easy thing to diagnose the causes. And so we are very lucky that Dr. Thomas has been invited by Dr. Paramesh to give this talk. And so I'll request Dr. Paramesh to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, sir. After that official introduction, I have to make some introductory remarks on the subject before I introduce the speaker and the chairman. Chairman is on the way. I think some of the points I have made as a general pediatrician and environmentalist. The headaches are the most common health condition globally. Nearly 75% of the adults experience headache in the past year. It is major cause for school and work absenteeism with a psychological impact like anxiety and depression. There are over 150 types of headaches, and all fall into those two categories, primary without any known cause or secondary for some other causes. The primary headache without any other medical condition, the most common would be the tension headache followed by the migraine headache. That's what we are going to focus on, that on migraine headache. And next comes the cluster headache and the new daily persistent headache. That's another new thing, entity has come there. The secondary headache from primary condition is there in the body. It comes because of that, such as the disease of the blood vessels of the brain, head injury, hypertension, infection, sinus congestion, eye strain, any growth in the brain, overuse of medicine, certain food. In food allergy, you can get headache, inhalation of the smoke, inhalation of the perfumes, pollens, and allergic diseases. Loud noise also can produce headache. Noise pollution. Air pollution, I think this is recently has come for pediatrician. Nearly 18% of the children under 18 years suffered headache in Hong Kong, not knowing exactly what they found out everything. It is related to the air pollution. There's a new entity has come from air pollution. And when do you worry about it? We all get the headache. When do you worry about it? If there is a weakness or if there is a confusion, if there are visual changes or any convulsions you develop, fits, speech and hearing problem, fever and vomiting or paralysis, then only you should rush to the hospital, see the doctor. We are here to learn little more on migraine headache and their environmental issues, even though women suffer most. At 40 to 80 years, men have a 46% higher risk of heart attack if there is a migraine headache. This is something unusual for us to hear about. To speak about this important topic, to educate us, we are here none other than Professor Praveen Thomas. He did his MBBS, MD, General Medicine, doctorate in the National Board of Neurology, postgraduate diploma in clinical neurology with the distinction, diplomat, European Board Neurology, clinical fellowship in headache only. He did it in UK. He's a consultant clinical lead, headache and international headache neurology services. He's the director of headache program, the founder chairman of the World Headache Society, director of WHS Academy, honorary clinical teaching fellow in the Queen Square Institute Neurology, United Kingdom, chief associate editor, headache, medicine and connections, assistant editor annals of the Indian Academy of Neurology, and also he the American Academy of Neurology with yoga and all those things. He's the president also talking about it. And he has many academic contribution and national, international journal. 2 books are on the way to be printed on the headache, and it will be recently going to be published. And we like to receive that one from our institute also. Etc. And to chair this session, we have another famous neurologist, and he is the chairman, consultant neurologist, and epileptic specialist at the Vikram Manipal Hospital. And he did his MBBS in AIMS in Bellour, Adi Chinchiragiri University. We are very much contact with them. And MD in Udaipur, DM in Trivandrum. A special interest is epilepsy, integrated medicine, neurological disorders, preventive neurology. He is going to chair the session and moderate it and give a concluding remarks. He's on the way. We are waiting for it. Without wasting much time, let's go ahead and call our speaker. Sir, over to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Professor Paramesh, for those kind words. And it's truly a privilege to be here for more than one reason. The first reason I would say is that I have been invited by someone who is, I would say, someone who has walked these paths before me, a clinician, who has thought that it's more important to focus not just on the immediate environment, but on the cosmos as a whole. And therefore, he's here with you. How lucky you are to have Professor Paramesh. I'm also very, very honored to meet the nephew of none other than Professor C.V. Raman. It gives me goosebumps to just think about him and also to see his genes right in front of me. In my younger days, I used to read about the C.V. Raman effect. To know that I'm standing in a building on a ground which is more than a century old. And let me tell you what is my greatest honor today, to speak to you all, the most brilliant minds of this country. Thank you so much for inviting me. I greet you on behalf of the World Headache Society, the Asia Pacific Headache Society, which is a sister concern of the World Headache Society, Headache Medicine Connections, which is our official journal, and to my own institution, Narayana Health. Maybe I can add on to this very nice introduction which Professor Paramesh made. I'm the chair of the environment group of the World Headache Society. We had to create such a group to make sure that whatever we do aligns with not just climate change, but the future of us with respect to the environment that we live in. I was the lead author for this publication. That's the Syndrome of Environment-Related Headaches, published as a classification of the World Headache Society, multi-axis classification of head, neck, and facial pains, published in Headache Medicine Connections. One more reason I thought I should be here, call it providence or not. I thought it not only just a privilege, but I thought it should be a reason. For some unknown reason, I have been recommended by a renowned neurologist who is the chair of this meeting, who is yet to arrive here, to be speaking on this occasion. Now, this lecture is going to be a bit of a trip across different time zones and across different levels of complexity. This is a picture of the recent Star Trek series. I don't know how many Trekkies out there, Trekkies, the fans of Star Trek in this group, and those who are listening to me virtually. But the latest one that you might be able to find in, I think, Netflix, has got this Red Angel suit. Now, this Red Angel suit is a suit which allows a human being to transcend space-time. So which means that this Red Angel could be visiting you from the future or the past whenever he or she likes. So the specific suit for that. For a change, I thought, let it be me who is actually doing this jump. Therefore, because of this very erratic jumps, I'm not going to follow a structure. You know, we normally for lectures, you give an outline, this is what you're going to cover, because I thought this is even more fun. Now, for all the movie buffs out there, this was just a couple of days back that I saw this nice movie called Runway 34. There is a dialogue which keeps reverberating within the movie. I don't know how many of you saw this, where Ajay Devgan says, हर हादसे के दो पहलू होते हैं, क्या हुआ और कैसे हुआ. इस क्या और कैसे के बीच में जो दरिया होते हैं, सच वही छुपा होता है. Between the what and the why lies the truth. So whenever we approach a very complex topics as scientists, let's try to look at the what and the why, even for a condition such as headache, because you know that when it comes to headaches, you can have a headache which can be life-threatening, where you can call it as a hadsa, which is a disaster, or a headache which is bothering you all the time. You can call it as taklif, musibat, whatever you'd like. From that perspective, it's important to understand first, what are headaches? Now, I've given 10 points here, and I'm going to ask you these questions. These are questions actually. Is it an ache anywhere in the head, including the neck and face? Is it a discomfort anywhere in the head, including the neck and face? Is it an abnormal sensation anywhere in the head, including the neck and face? Heaviness anywhere in the head, including the neck and face? Pain anywhere in the head, including the neck and face? Fogginess anywhere in the head, including neck and face? Fuzziness anywhere in the head, including neck and face? Unexplainable feelings anywhere in the head, including neck and face? None of the above, all of the above. Probably this is the world's largest MCQ with 10 different choices. But if I were to ask you, what is your most intelligent answer to this? Whenever we say, there's a trick in these multiple choice questions. If you have an all of the above and a none of the above, it's very likely that the examiner wants one of these answers. I'm not sure whether you heard this. But what do you think is the answer? Can someone just volunteer and tell me? Okay, I'm going to say it's all of the above. Now, there's a reason why I brought this particular point. All over, I've been saying neck and face. Right? So for headache neurology, headache science, headache medicine, which I specialize in, any discomfort, any abnormal feeling above the shoulders, including the shoulders, which we call as the head, is part of the headache syndrome. It's like when you say a head is being chopped off, you saw Bahubali too, where the person, there's a chopping of the head of someone. That's actually the base of the neck, isn't it? I mean, still when we say that, when you ask people, do you have headaches? No, I don't have headaches, but I've got this pain here. Well, neck is part of your head, right? So that's just this terminology. These are just semantics. I just want to say that when you say what are headaches, people are not sure where they should go, who they should meet when it comes to a facial pain, when it comes to a headache, head. So all of these are really covered under headache medicine, which is a very broad discipline. Now coming to the second most important kyun hua, or why did this happen? Now this one single slide should be very important to understand that all headaches, all discomforts, whatever they are, which we can call as the attack, that happens due to a not yet fully elucidated mechanism which activates certain nerves that supply the soft tissues of the head and the blood vessels. And what it results in is a signal which interacts among the brain, the blood vessels of the brain, and the surrounding nerves, and the result is pain. Now, what I have shown here is the head of a person whose skin has been removed, of course, different layers, and you can see a few named yellow structures. Now, the yellow structures are the nerves. You can also see there are some named reddish worm-like structures, which are the blood vessels, which are the arteries. The little darker ones, blue ones, which we call as the veins. Now, this is important because a lot of people, when they use, especially it's a cultural perspective, when they say words such as the nerves, when they say that something is pulsating, they may be referring to blood vessels or to nerves, but remember, it's the blood vessels which carry blood, which you know, which is basic school level knowledge. Nerves, which you cannot see from outside unless it's thickened and very prominent. But it's the nerves which carry the signals of all the sensations throughout the body, carried to the brain, is through the nerves. It's the nerves which gives all the signals to move the muscles as I'm lifting my hands and lowering it. the glands, the sweat glands of my body, to contract the gland or not is being decided by nerves. So that's what the nerves do. And I've just shown a very small section. We have a few named nerves. There are a few scores of such named nerves which we target in some of our treatments. So you can see it's a huge complex running into thousands of branches of both the nerves and the blood vessels. So here's a question. Someone asked me, most of the time I get this, doctor, I'm having a very stressful lifestyle. I've got a PhD to complete. I've got a target to keep in my software company. Is that the cause of my headache? I say, no. The cause for your headache lies right here. Your brain, your blood vessels, your nerves. If you did not have blood vessels or the brain or the nerves, there would be no headaches. Then why is it that why am I getting it during stressful periods? Well, you can call them as triggers. They're not causes, they're triggers. They can trigger all these nerves, put them into action. And what's the attack? This attack which results in pain. And what are they caused by? Signals. You can call them electrical signals, but you see, it's not the electricity that we're talking about. We're talking about ions which move, producing what's called as an action potential. That's what we call as the electricity in the nerves. Now, I went through this because I was not satisfied with one single definition of environment which I thought I knew, which I thought would explain everything around. So there's a physical environment. I'm standing at the lectern. There's this wonderful room here, a lot of greenery outside. Is that what I should be calling my environment, at least from a biological perspective? So therefore, I went through all these famous definitions. So environment covers all the outside factors that have acted on the individual since he began life. Anything immediately surrounding an object and exerting a direct influence on that. Everything that affects the individual except his genes, which I may not agree, because genes and epigenetics is also an environment, I would say. But the best explanation, or the best definition, is boring, landfill, and well, which I found. A person's environment consists of the sum total of all the stimulation which he receives from his conception until his death. This sort of summarizes and puts the perspective away from soil, tree, and air alone. It doesn't mean that the soil, tree, and air is not part of the environment, but gives actually a huge, the compass is actually expanding into the areas which are any place which can give rise to a stimulus. Any place. So this is something which the Divecha Center has been doing and continues to do in a wonderful way when it comes to the immediate natural environment, be it the glaciers, the valleys, rivers, mountains, or that of the cosmic environment, physical geographic environment, the soil, climate, inorganic resources, natural agencies, and then the natural physical processes such as gravity, radiation, combustion. And then there's also this biological environment, isn't it? There's germ life. There's bacteria, there's virus, there's COVID. And there's an environment which is not just outside, but also inside. When we say inside, we just talk about this internal environment because we think that we are really covered by the skin. There's nothing like inside and outside. I mean, these are all porous. I mean, we are all continually, these are all sort of divisions which we can arbitrarily create that the skin or something is protecting you. But you see, we are constantly interacting with ions and with a lot of other things, constantly bombarded by things which we cannot see and continuously being affected by them. So therefore, environment has to be a wider perspective for a biologist or a scientist, especially one who is dealing with the human health. This is a Wikipedia article. You know what happens when there is overstimulation of this environment? You know, maybe about a couple of hours back, I came from a part of the world which was very noisy, and I would say with a lot of overload. I'm very pleased to be in this part of the world, which I never knew, which is just about 20 kilometers, but in the middle of the city, in the midst of this lovely garden, or you can see a mini forest, and it's so quiet here. It's so nice here. If I were to sit there instead of you, I would have slept by now, because it's so nice and quiet. Now, what we are normally facing is sensory overload. So what happens when there is a sensory overload? So any senses can be overloaded, you see, whether it's touch. So you have mainly the touch, the smell, there is the eyes, there is taste and skin, the 5 basic senses, visceral senses. The problems with overload really comes in 2 different ways. What you're seeing on the top, does anyone know which place is this, or which country it belongs to? What you're seeing right here at the top are 2 temples. One is a temple to Lord Buddha, and the other one is a temple to Lord Maitreya. And this is in the Yanjing mountain range of China, right? If I remember correctly, this is more than 3,000 feet above the sea level. So what really happened? I mean, if you look at this picture, and if you see about probably this is the base where a lot of people live. And if you thought about your next vacation, how many of you would like to go there? Can I have can someone who's interested, you can show your hands. Yeah, lovely, sir, professor. Thank you. I would have loved to go there. If I were to go there today, going all the way up, let's say that I'm lazy, I don't want to climb all those long tracks. If I want to take a helicopter and probably land it somewhere there, within a few hours, I'd be most likely brought down to the base camp, to the base station with an acute mountain sickness and hospitalized. And if I'm lucky, I'll survive. What happens is if you go to a very high altitude, suddenly, more than 2,500 feet above sea level, suddenly, if you go without acclimatization, there is an increase in the pressure inside the brain. And this is what we call as acute mountain sickness. Right? So even if you like it, this gives you a very pleasant imagery that, yes, when you talk about an environment, it's not just the vision, but it also gives an emotion. Oh yeah, this should be my next holiday spot. Now, the problem is, if I go there, whether I'm fit enough to survive there depends on my physiology. So that again comes to another important point. If you look down, that's the Arctic glacier, which is melting, and it's freezing cold temperature, 0 to -3. And imagine going there, maybe for a vacation with warm clothes. Yes, there might be maybe someone who's very excited, finished all the countries in the world. Why not try the Arctic now? But you see, it's difficult to survive in these environments, although it looks very beautiful. Now, given a choice, I would any day come here, be a part of this building and organization because I find it so beautiful. But someone who is here for like 20 years will say, oh, come on, it's the same building, it's the same trees, let's go to some other place. Just like I'm from a place called Alleppey in Kerala. Supposed to be National Geographic's 12, the world's must-see locations before you die. I was born and brought up there. And for me, it's like, what's there? You see, familiarity breeds contempt, as they say. Now, The very same building that you saw, there are people living there, alive and healthy. This gentleman who is swimming there, his name is Louis Pug. You must have heard about him. A man who can swim in these icy cold waters, what would normally kill some of us, at least most of us or all of us, within a few minutes. Now he has acclimatized, he has trained, he has got some genetics which makes him do so. And there are people who can climb the Everest even without oxygen and still survive. It's about acclimatization of the environment. Now, when you look at these environments, which I'm showing you right here, if I explain to you what these are, I mean, I'm sure the picture on the left doesn't need an explanation. For those of you who have traveled, maybe I'm not sure, and I've not traveled the Indian railways in the last couple of decades, at least maybe. Prior to that, this was a very common scene. And what you're seeing is quite evident in the picture on the left. But on the right side, also, you're finding something like a tunnel. And this tunnel-like device is essentially part of the gas chamber, which was used by Hitler's SS to kill people. In fact, it's very saddening that the Zyklon B gas which they used, people were just asked to disrobe, saying that's part of the disinfectant procedure. They used to disrobe them and then exposed to this gas. They were killed, and then they were put in these, and their bodies were burnt. Now, this environment gives you a disgusting feel, doesn't it? I mean, just imagine, environment, as I told you in the prior one, if you wanted to have a holiday, how many would raise your hands? And then just a few of you actually did that. But if I ask you, how many would like to be in this environment, in this room? There have been times when I've actually got into one of these toilets and almost with double the speed that I got in, I got out, trying to look for another toilet to use. Why? Because, very simple, it was someone else's excreta, and this environment gave me a very unpleasant feel. Now just think about it. If it was your own, would it disgust you as much as it is because it is someone else's? Think about it. And these feelings of horrid, death. And when you look at these things, the emotions which come with environments, do you think they're absolute? Look at these images. I have seen with my own eyes. I'm not sure how many of you have. They're still there. Manual scavengers of this country who are able to go down into the spits and take out human excreta. This is part of the environment, you see. And they have an environment to be in. And they are able to live, be alive, come out alive, have a good dinner, have a nice sleep, probably better than some of us. And then on the right side, you see that torches, the massacre of what you actually saw in the camp. There's someone here, but this monk actually self-immolating as probably as part of his religious process or because of political unrest in that part of the country. And there were many such monks who died, who were able to do that. So the question is whether this environment is absolute or is it something which is relative and acclimatizable. Now, when it comes to everyone, this is actually the time jump. I'm going back to 1995, a wonderful movie which I saw named Kuldeep Punal. I think it was nominated for the Oscars, I don't know for which segment. But in that, Nasser tells Kamal Haasan, ஒவ்வொரு மனுஷனுக்கும் ஒரு breaking point இருக்கு. And this is supposed to be a universal law according to the scriptwriter. It's like niyati. Now, whether we have a breaking point, yes, I mean, logically speaking, we all do. There's a point beyond which we will not be able to survive. It's a very logical observation. Appreciate the script writer for that particular aspect. Now, when it comes to these environmental triggers for headaches, let me tell you, this list is not inclusive of everything. You have a patient, doctors we say about patient, but you have people whose headaches are actually triggered by hot weather. See, when you say 75%, as Professor Paramage said, there are, if you look at it in a very large perspective, it's almost 100%. It's the most prevalent genetic disease, the most common neurological disease affecting mankind, which means that there is a very, very high possibility that this group in this room, everyone's having those genes, has had headaches at some point in the past. And as Professor said, 75% would have had at least once in 75 years. Some people are so badly disabled. Some people have a sudden headache and they go to the emergency room. They may survive, they may not survive. So there are various causes of headache, more than 300. And for some people, it's hot weather. I'm just going to show you something. I'm not sure whether this is going to play here. Let's see. Okay, this is a patient I saw this morning. I wanted to always, because this is something which was I was invited for this talk by Professor Paramesh quite a long time. And I thought I should be reaching at least half an hour back, but then I couldn't. Patients, some of these days which I'm completely free, patients hardly come. But in the days when I want to attend a meeting such as these, patients just came, and I asked him, can I have your permission in playing this video of his? Let's see what he's going to say. I'm not sure this is going to play. Okay, now if it is not, this video separately, it's, yeah. Actually put it as a separate file because I thought it's without any edits, it's just something which I thought it's interesting to show you. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Can we increase the volume? So he's a gentleman, quite a young person, and he said he gets headaches after he wears a helmet. So 15 minutes after exposure to the air conditioner or after a head bath, he would get a headache. He would continue to have it until his hair is dry. We call it as head bath headaches. And then after it's exposed to AC or cold weather, he gets a headache which starts at around 15 minutes, may go on until a tablet is taken. This is a gentleman who starts getting a headache within a few minutes of using his helmet. And after that, it continues throughout the journey. And then after removing it, after a few minutes later, his headache is gone. Now, there are very specific names for these types of headaches, and I'll tell you why. Because see, any of these environmental triggers can cause a headache. I'm saying again, it's not cause a headache, it trigger a headache. Hot weather, which is a very common one, but you see cold also. Windy weather, what happens when the barometric pressure goes up or low? In windy weathers, it's usually going down, and then you can have these headaches. Rise in humidity, geomagnetic activity, although it's not clearly correlated, but then certain months of geomagnetic activity, rain, low barometric readings. In fact, there's something called as the weatherman, the migraine weatherman. They can predict the weather even better than the weatherman. They know that this is what's going to happen in the next 48 hours or 72 hours. Head bath, as I showed you, cold stimulus, noise, variations in spheric frequencies. So spherics, as you know, you know better than me what spherics are. Now this variation in the spherics of the atmosphere. Atmospheric spherics have also been shown to trigger some migraines. Glare, flicker, and contrasting patterns of what you see on the screen. Increased screen frequency, fluorescent lighting, although it's energy saving, incandescent lighting may be better for some people, although it can cause heat and then it can cause a migraine. So it's not like one is better than the other. Intense odors, strong perfumes, air quality, and cigarette smoke, mold, which you can see in some of the buildings. Of course, you can't find it in IASC. And then external pressure headache, the one which you saw the gentleman having, which is because of the helmet. It can be because of the masks. It can be because of goggles that's worn during swimming. Scuba divers, they all use that. So anything which actually compresses, and specific for, I think for Indian women, people who tie their hair very tightly, and they wear these clips, things actually. They're pressing on certain parts of the head. The nerves are already sort of sensitive and it triggers the headache. Right. This is what is called as cold stimulus headache. You have people, I'm not sure whether you have had it, but the moment you eat something cold, eat, inhale, or apply on the body, it will suddenly cause a stabbing pain and it can cause watering from the eyes. It's called as a cold stimulus headache, and it's also called as an ice cream headache, as shown in this picture. So someone who is actually having this cold triggers these nerve endings which are there in the heart palate, and then what happens is that it triggers this whole migraine. So all these types of headaches are common in people with a genetic predisposition for migraine. It doesn't mean it's a different disease altogether. Of course, there are certain receptors called the TRP1, which is implicated in these ice cream headaches, certain ones which suddenly comes and then goes. But these are certain environmental factors, if I may. It need not necessarily be food. It can be any form of cold, even cold wind. You can have headaches associated with scuba diving. This is a movie which I think was released in 2015 about this. There's this couple who goes under the, basically it's all shot at the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this movie, but there's a scene in which the protagonist, that's Prithviraj, towards the end, you can see him bleeding from his nose. What's the reason? There's carbon monoxide poisoning. How did that happen? That's because of the contamination of the scuba tank. Right? You can have decompression sickness. Suddenly, someone ascends very fast. So you can have arterial embolism. People can have strokes and sinus barotrauma. So this is again the time traveler moving to 2015. But you see, they're movie based. But what I wanted to say is that anything which is around you to do with any of the physical forces, whether it's temperature, whether it's pressure, whether it's humidity, they all have a propensity to produce a headache disorder. Now, some of you, in this huge institution, there are scientists belonging to different fields. Some of you are into astrophysics and astronomy, and you must be keen on knowing a little bit about space headaches. So astronauts, about 17 of them who were actually interviewed, they had headaches when they went into space. And this is the Apollo 7 astronaut that you see, Vali Shura, in the 1968 photo. What happened? When these people go up, there is the effect of microgravity. And as a result of which there's fluctuations in the intracerebral pressure, and there can be these exploding, pulsating, heavy headaches, which are really bothersome. So there is an effect of the environment, even when you're outside of the Earth. It's not limited to just the Earth. So we're talking about colonization of planets, exoplanets. We are looking at so many things now. It's important to understand the human being remains the same, whichever environment he is put. Either he's acclimatized to it or he's not. So people, all these astronauts, with all the training that they have, the moment they go into space, despite all the training, they still have this motion sickness because of an imbalance between the visual and the vestibular system. And they also have these pressure abnormalities, which is why medications are being developed for astronauts to be used in space to reduce the intracranial pressure. Now, before I go into something which is going to be beyond the typical environment-related talks that you can see, I'll just complete this part off. This is something which you will be able to come across in your Google searches. A little bit of, maybe a little extensive Google search, but then you would all be taught about ergonomics and how exactly should you prevent some of these things. Prohibiting smoking near outdoor access doors of public buildings, changing indoor lighting sources to avoid fluorescent lights or use a filter, and ergonomically designed computer chairs, flicker frequency, VDT filters, and tinted or filtered spectacle glasses for computer users, anti-glare filter in the computer monitor, sound absorption panels, because you see that sound is an important component of a sensitized nervous system as far as a trigger is concerned. So what really happens in migraine is there is an area of the brain called the hypothalamus, which and the thalamus. So there is an abnormal activity there. So there is something like a sort of filtering system, you see. All the sensations which a human being experiences is multiplied several times in a patient who has migraine, right? So noises become very irritable, loud sounds, loud noise, like bright lights, smells, they can all be disturbing. Anything which is beyond the normal comfort zone or even within the comfort zone of another individual can be troublesome for a patient with migraine. So therefore, if you ask people, see, it's 80% of the world's population. So why not an office policy where you say that avoid fragrances, whether you like it or not? I mean, as long as it improves the quality of life of people around you, why not? A dark, private area to go to when experiencing a migraine. How many offices actually have them? The last bit of my my lecture, which is not going to be too long from now, is going to be about a couple of suggestions which I have when it comes to an institution such as the Pioneer Institution for Research and Science in India. But before I go to, I just want to just go through these common advices, and of which how much of, when we see this, when I look at it myself, how much of it is put in practice? I was in the UK, and how much of this is in practice in my hospital, which is one of the biggest centers, one of the biggest headache centers in the UK. And how much of this is put in practice? Now it looks good on paper, but how much of it is in practice? Same thing when it comes to my hospital right now, or the IISC that I am now. But it's not too difficult, you see. Now the most, I would say it's interesting to know why. Why should there be a headache? Because you see, there are many whys, again, coming back to that first slide where the secret lies between the why and the what. Why should there be pain or headaches or any sort of discomfort? Is there an evolutionary advantage? Or is it a disadvantage? I mean, most of the things evolution has given us is an advantage, isn't it? Evolution is supposed to be survival of the fittest and promoting some good traits. But problem when it comes to researching on experience of pain, see, IASP, International Association for Study of Pain, has defined pain as an unpleasant experience with a bodily harm or a perceived bodily harm with an emotional component to it. A lot of studies have gone into studying mollusks, into studying invertebrates, other vertebrates, and whether this avoidant behavior to a noxious stimulus because of a nociceptor which picks up the pain, is it the same as what we call as pain, or is it something different? One of the things is sort of fairly straightforward. Many of this enhanced, heightened sensitivity to environment would have been an asset at some point to at least a few ancestors who were living in an environment full of threats. Does that make sense? Because if the threats were identified because of your sharp, amplified hearing or your amplified vision, you would be able to avoid those threats. But what has happened is there's been a lot of maladaptation. Unfortunately, stayed. The threats are gone. We are well protected, but still, you see, it's just like there's something called as the false smoke detector alarm theory, right? So you can detect smoke, but sometimes you can see them just firing off. It's a false alarm. We call it a false alarm, isn't it? And that's what's really happening in many of these pain disorders. Now, see, when it comes to environment, this is something which I want to say. Environment is not just what we say as the immediate physical environment surrounding a human. This is what I would call as an anthropocentric view. I mean, environment cannot be just what is around humans, isn't it? What we generally speak about environments is space, right? And you can see if it's an atom within the atom. Well, let's say anything. We've learned in school there's molecules and then there's atoms, and inside the atom there's the nucleus, the neutrons, the protons, electrons, and within that you have subatomic particles, and you split them and you find the quarks, and then the quarks which are basically the upgoing and the downgoing one. Now, you see, around any of these subatomic particles, you have an environment or you have a force field, right? So this is what I'm going to just come across, which I'm going to just drive across to you. Now, how many of you know or have you seen or heard about this person? He is known as Trilinga Swami. Trilinga Swami is supposed to have lived for 280 years, and his birth and his death have been described. He was in Varanasi. Now, this person, he had a many years in meditating, and finally he turns up in Varanasi, in Kashi Vishwanath temple. And then what he does is that he defecates in the sanctum sanctorum of Shiva, and he was thrown out by the temple priests because they said that he has made this pure environment impure, and he's that one of those Vedantins who actually propagated what is called as the non-duality. Now, this is interesting because, when we talk about environments, ultimately, in all those grotesque pictures and all those beautiful pictures, or what you see around you, ultimately, what you are seeing is this matter, which all boils down to this subatomic particle, and which again can be split, and then you come back to these strings or quarks, whatever you are. Not a physicist, but this is what I understand, the substance of reality, and about quantum entanglement, which really means a lot of what they call as the quantum guru. I mean, when it comes to cosmologists who try to merge Eastern mysticism with this and say that this is what Advaita is all about. I mean, they could be hardcore materialistic dualists who say that, well, you guys are not making any sense. But whatever it is, this is where we are as far as physics is concerned, as to the basis of reality. So therefore, there is a connection between one and the other, and you all know what the butterfly effect is. And these are the forces. Now, these forces, how many of them do we experience in our day-to-day life? We can experience gravity. What about the others? Even though our senses are not able to experiencing them, they are all inside us. The weak force, the strong force, the electromagnetic force, they're all within us, right? So our receptors are limited to experience only a few forces of nature, you see. And there's an interesting thing about the physical forces between humans, and humans interact and attract and repel each other based on their social interactions in online world. This beautiful study actually compared about this exchange between the proton electron and actually what happens in a game called Dragons, where people are interacting, and how they actually found a parallel between these interactions. Talking about modeling Earth systems and human interactions called as the mesh, and this is something which, based on the climate change, they're able to predict some of the things that are happening based on these models, which is what we do as scientists, it's important to model them based on interactions at the level of the particle and at the level of the humans, which are actually macrocosms of this microcosm. When it comes to these symptoms that we talk about, the mucous membrane irritations, itching, and chest tightness and headaches, we call it a sick building syndrome. We blame the building. I mean, what best can we do? I mean, we know that things are beyond our control. Something is triggering something. And what else can we do? We say that, okay, the building may be sick, rather than saying that we ourselves are sick. So, you know, before I conclude this talk, I want to take you back to my very young days as a schoolboy who grew up in the Middle Eastern region, very hot climate in the United Arab Emirates. And those days, there was air conditioners at that time. And there was an air conditioner in your house, in the taxis that you traveled, but not necessarily in the school bus. It was very hot. And of course, anything anywhere outside the building was very, very hot. And you know, at that point of time, I dreamt I should create the suit which has got an air conditioner inside. And I should wear it so that I can go wherever I want with wearing the suit. And, you know, at that time, it was probably science fiction. But let me tell you, now that there's a suit, I don't know which country has made it. We can work out in the scorching sun wearing that suit because it regulates the humidity and the temperature. So you see this sort of a suit. Again, this is something which is very close to my heart because there used to be a time, I think many years back, my father actually told me a story. I'm not even sure whether the story is true, but he told me that it's possibly true about a king who called his most intelligent, wisest men of his kingdom and said, I don't know, was it Akbar who had his wise men in his court? Yes, I believe. Called him and said, look, I don't want any person in my kingdom to have their legs dirtied. Their feet should not have any dirt. This is what my requirement is. So you come up with an idea and you tell me which is the best way to do that. So after a lot of deliberations and after all these think tanks thought about the different ways to mitigate this problem, they came up with this idea. One Pandit in the court said, let's cover the entire kingdom with animal hide, basically leather, isn't it? Animal hide, leather. This will take care of things. Brilliant idea. No one's feet is going to get dirtied again. And that's when this another intelligent man in the court said, why should the entire kingdom be covered in animal hide? Why don't you just cover just the sole of your foot? It's still going to prevent the dirt from touching your feet, isn't it? And that's probably how sandals were invented. I'm not sure. This is a story by my father. And the reason why I'm saying that is, you see, there are many things which you cannot control in the environment. Although we're trying to talk about that on a global level, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about policies, we are talking about future Earth, which we should. At the same time, people like Elon Musk is trying to look at exoplanets, moving outside. It's also important to think about these kind of suits because whether you like it or not, there is the chaos theory which is going to act. There is degradation which is happening. Like it or not, strife and wars and disasters are going to happen. How about building a suit like this? I mean, the AC suit is still on. It's no longer science fiction. 30 years back it was. When I say about this suit, I need not necessarily mean a suit which can traverse space-time. Well, if it does, well and good. But you the most brilliant scientists of this country should think about it. Building a suit which can mitigate migraine, controlling not just the temperature, and basically you're having a miniaturized weather control system inside where humidity and barometric pressure is also equalized. What happens if the barometric pressure is not equalized? If you have empty cavities such as the sinuses and the lungs, if your ambient pressure, when your body tries to equalize it, when it's not able to do so, there is tissue damage, triggering of the trigeminal system, which can cause these kind of headaches, which can cause barotrauma. This is the reason why people who are diving, people who go in an airplane, sudden ascent and descent can have airplane headaches, space headaches, diving headaches. It's all related to pressure. And ultimately, finally, if you look at the Advaiti, they will all quote Nikola Tesla, who said, if you want to find the answers, the secrets of the universe, think in terms of frequency and vibrations. The moment you try to harness these, which you have been doing, where you have been bombarding particles and creating more subatomic particles in places such as CERN, maybe in IISc also, what you should be thinking about is such kind of useful, which I'm sure it's someone's already thought about and now I'll also believe, but I'm telling you, I can provide you the kind of inputs that's required to build these kind of suits from a physiological point of view. Whatever we can do to change our internal milieu, the genomics, the proteomics, into changing our evolution even, is something which you should think about when it comes to ecosystem management and conservation strategies. Because you see, ultimately what matters is to develop a more resilient group of people. I mean, someone had this idea long back and annihilated a very large segment of the world's population. That's the other extreme. I'm not thinking about that way. I'm thinking about changing the epigenetics, if not the genetics, so that one can influence one's path in life. By changing the environment, you're actually changing your destiny. And this has been demonstrated by neuroimaging, neuropsychopharmacology, diffusion tract imaging. People who have more connectivity in their brains, they're more resilient to become depressed. Less connectivity, more chances of feeling low and gloomy. So that's the diffusion tract imaging which showed that particular study. This is you might know this gentleman on the right, that's Anil Sheth, brilliant neuroscientist. And he was talking about this promise of psychedelics. Psychedelics is a group of these mind-altering substances which have tried to expand the experience of consciousness. When it comes to people thinking about psychedelics, the immediate thing is people think about narcotics. People think about the harm due to addiction and ending up in sort of these de-addiction centers. There is a lot of ills in this society, in this world. We can buy a cigarette just just across the corner of the road. You can buy a bottle of alcohol in a liquor shop. Killers. And people do that because they have this very momentary feeling of elation or a mind-altering property. People go for drugs. But what are psychedelics? Psychedelics have been used from time immemorial by the people who have jumped across cultural developments by a group of people we call as the medicine men, or the people who have been practicing certain esoteric medicine. And these, you call it mushrooms, magic mushrooms, many of these, the properties of these are that it increases the connectivity in the brain, the resting state connectivity, such that after this, people experience the universe in a different way. This is what we, as people who practice yoga or people who do a lot of, people who excel in certain aspects, be it academics, be it physics, be it geography, be it medicine, be it dance, be it artistry, they all develop the stage where they're able to have this experience of oneness. People have artificially reached the shamanic groups of people across the various cultures in the world, including that of India. That's the promise of psychedelics. And psychedelics are used more and more in medicine as a treatment. Now, what's going to happen if you're completely deprived of senses? Like I told you, extremes of any senses can trigger a migraine or a headache. What if you have a continuous stimuli? What if you just look at the wall for a long time? You will have hallucinations. That's called the Gansfield effect. If there is a non-altering stimulus continuously coming, it's as if you're going blind and you're actually seeing things. And it's happening in the visual cortex of the brain, the V4 visual cortex of the brain. So it's not that you just have a continuous, bland, single stimulated experience in the world. No, experience is always changing frequencies, how we perceive things. But extremes can trigger a headache because there's a genetic propensity in all of us. And before I conclude, I just want to tell you a bit about qualia as well. See, qualia is that experience. You see that people say that where does the redness of red lie in the brain? You dissect the brain, you can see neurons, astrocytes, branches. Where does that thing? They call it qualia. There is a very interesting study. This came out in 2017, and this is about the information structure, the patterns of axonal firings. For example, visual, which comes as an information message that I'm looking at the color blue. Now, this information message is correlated with the information structure, where you have a representation and you have an identification. So, which means that even if the information message is not conveyed, even if the information structure is there, you can have the message lying that, yes, this is how the blue is, or the feeling what's, as mentioned in this article, the best excursion, best holiday that I've had can be experienced there. The person who has finally come to experience this particular thing. Sorry, I think I've just gone to the wrong page. Now, this is a slide I just want to show you. This is basically, Arjuna is actually asking, oh Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? He's asking what's the prajna. How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Right? The one who is constantly aware that he's constantly in interaction and in oneness with every other particle in this universe. And then Lord Krishna goes on to explain, these are some of the features. You see, everything is about connectivity. I'm here because of this, otherwise I wouldn't be here. It's for example, the chair of this meeting has actually told Professor Paramesh to invite me. So these are some of the references that I have. It's some of the papers which I have written on the classification has been used, and talking about spherics. I can go on to speak on spherics or on those on barometric pressures and how does the human physiology react to those and how we can modify those. But I think for want of time, I'm going to end this lecture now, and I hope you have not bored you too much, and I'd like to take in some questions. Thank you very much.
Even web also, there are no questions from there.
I'm more concerned about the very mundane, straightforward questions which people usually ask. For example, how can I prevent a migraine? It's a simple question, isn't it? Well, the straightforward answer is there is not much you can actually. do. But there are certain things. For example, I always say, if you come to my clinic, I will say, avoid heat, avoid stress, avoid not eating on time, drink a lot of water, these kind of things, and that's it. My job is over. And just I'm imagining if I was sitting at the other end, how do you avoid stress, and how do you, avoid the sun, and how do you avoid the noise? And so it's easy to say, but you have to find your own space. It's about space engineering, I would tell you, very simple. See, there is a very interesting concept in Tantra. Tantra, there are different types in this country. And Tantra, if you ask me what is Tantra, it is engineering. I mean, that is how they would say, basically using geometric designs and certain tools, which we call as the mantras, which are basically sounds to alter the space around you. So Tantra and Mantra, we have been always saying, see how many of us when we go out on the roads, when we see a temple or a church, we just pay respect to that. How many of us when we buy a car, we still call the pujari and have that particular thing being done? So it's all about altering space. You can't change the entire universe, but possibly you can change the environment around you, which is what, if you look at the tantrics rituals, for example, I'll just give you something. The Dashadik Bandhanam, these mudras which are used, what they're doing is they're creating a mini temple around you, a space. So when you say purity and those kind of things, I'm not talking about purity in terms of dirt and let's say some sort of dirt accumulated or kind of pure. See, when it comes to the unified experience, we're talking about one-dimensional strings. We are not talking about something. So it's about changing that in such a way that it alters the space. People call it as your Zen zone, or you can call it as a figure, in certain cultures of actually changing the space around you. That space engineering, that immediate environment which is in your control. If you can make it comfortable, you're able to change your, alter your experience of some of these headache disorders. And they say dinacharya, which is our yogic tradition, having patterns, having regularity, because anything which becomes irregular can trigger migraines. Again, easier said than done. I can tell my patients, do yoga, right? But about doing it in the right way, the right time, getting a good teacher, getting a good guide, which is what our Guru Parampara is all about. And if we have the good gurus, we are blessed.
So since there are no questions on the website, any questions to be asked? Yes, sir.
What are the major diagnostic techniques now for migraine, which you want?
Even now, when it comes to application of technology, we are using only research level technology to understand what's happening in migraine. When it comes to diagnostics, we are relying not on technology, but on the patient's story. Now, this comes to a very, very important question which you have asked us. What is migraine? When we say migraine, we often refer to the genetic migraines that most of us probably have. So migraine is a disease because of an abnormal gene. But remember, migraine is also the end stream effect of a host of other disorders. When I say end stream effect, it means that there are many such disorders, even up to 300 of them, which can behave like a migraine. And then you dissect it further, you come to around 40 to 50 conditions, which you put up in the classification which we created, which can mimic a migraine. So the important thing is to identify the chameleons, the outliers, the mimics, and then to say that, are you talking about a genetic migraine or are you talking about a mimic? That is when investigations come in. If someone's story is very typical of a genetic migraine, there is absolutely no role for any investigation. Whereas if there is a suspicion of a worsening, or if there's a suspicion of what we call as a secondary migraine due to some other disease which is now behaving as a migraine, then there is a role for scans and blood tests. If you look at the functional imaging studies, you will find abnormalities in patients who are having chronic migraine. They have depression, anxiety, all those circuits which are actually lightened up. You'll be able to find it. But it's not required to diagnose because firstly, the technology is very expensive. We don't have very strong these kind of biomarkers where you say that, okay, if this is elevated, we call that this is migraine. Unlike, let's say, a disease like anemia, you say that if your hemoglobin is below this level, you have anemia. If your hemoglobin is beyond that, you call it as polycythemia. We don't have that. We don't need that as of now. But we need to tease out the dangerous migraines, or rather not the dangerous migraines, migraine mimics.
I think as a clinician, we used to say to diagnose when a child comes with a migraine, we learned that way there is no test, anything to prove it, as a matter of fact, it's said. If a pediatrician say it looks like migraine, there is no family history, anything like that, a neurologist has to certify. These two people, that's the diagnostic, that's what we used to do. That's how we practice. That's true, sir. Since there are no questions on the website also and here also, I again take this opportunity, sincerely thanks Praveen coming over here, giving a wonderful thought, physics related, mathematics related. I'm also a little off in that angle. That's why medicine people will take only half of those departments. But he had covered very well environmental issues. I sincerely thank for welcoming Professor Srinivasan. And I thank you all for participating and listening to those things. I request Professor Srinivasan give a small token of appreciation from our institute. A small token of appreciation, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor.
And chairman couldn't make it, I guess.
Oh, you're not ready? Okay.
You like it. Can we have a picture?
Yeah.
All of it?